Welcome to Riverdale After Dark, a podcast about the CW's Riverdale that's taped after dark. I'm Alex.
When you live in a train car that's run down, the only way to look forward to anything is to have it decked out like it's some fancy-ass train shit. I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And we are going to be talking about Riverdale Season 7, Episode 4, Chapter 121, Love and Marriage. Love and Marriage. Goes
Beautiful
together.
Sinatra.
Like a horse and
Oh, no, I was singing the Married with Children theme song.
Yeah, Married with Children.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, we are definitely going to be getting into spoilers for that. But first, a bit of recap of what you need to know. The gang is all back in 1955 with their memories rebooted, their emotional memories. Got some questions about that maybe we'll get into more on this episode of the podcast. But the big event that's happened is murder is back in Riverdale, even in this more innocent time.
Hey, murder's back, baby!
As Ethel has been accused of murdering her parents. Maybe it was based on a comic book, maybe not. We get a little more into it, exactly what Ethel was up to on the night in question. Part of what she's up to, without spoiling it too much right up front, is Julian Blossom is the brother of Cheryl Blossom. Last episode, Julian was encouraged by his mother to encourage Archie to ask Cheryl out, which he did. Archie did not know, just as Cheryl arguably doesn't exactly know that she is a lesbian. So they started dating, or at least going steady, I guess, if you want to call it that, in this time period, much to the chagrin of Toni Topaz and Veronica Lodge and Betty Cooper in particular, all who are gunning for one half of that relationship. Now, we left off on a cliffhanger that made several people very angry at the end of the last episode, where Cheryl said that she had slept with Archie. Get it out of the way up front. She didn't. We find out very quickly.
Great call. I believe you called that, Alex, or one of us did, and that was
nice. Hoping beyond hope, and my hope was rewarded. So I'm very happy about that. But we find out a lot more about that and get more into Cheryl's sexuality in this episode as she continues to grapple with that. And Archie continues to grapple with how he is feeling about a bevy of other people. Meanwhile, Midge is going steady with Fangs that comes to a head this episode. Yeah. Betty and Kevin are also at a crossroads. Now I'm blanking. So basically Betty wants to have sex very badly with Kevin, gives him a human sexuality textbook that she had taken from Ethel's house and said, this is it, ultimatum, sleep with me or that's it. Although not exactly using those words.
Yeah, I mean, take it easy on that.
Oh, okay. What do you think she was discussing? Well, real quick, if it wasn't like sex, what else was on the menu?
No, Betty was kind of like feeling like there was no affection towards her, and she was just like, hey, either we're going to try to move our relationship forward in a way that's
this is a direct quote from the last episode. Betty said, Kevin, bone in or bone out, right?
Nah.
Let me be honest.
On that one.
I was with you, Alex, until you, I guess, opened your mouth. That's not necessarily a sex thing you just said.
I don't know. I'm still learning along with the show. And the last couple I think we need to talk about is Veronica and Jughead that struck up a bit of flirtation towards the end of the last episode. Bonded over movies, and things go up in a big way by the end of this episode. So let's jump into it. Do we want to talk about the Archie stuff first? Because I think that was the big thing that we kind of left off on the last episode. Yeah. We're picking up here. Obviously, I was very negative about it. in the last episode.
Yep.
I was pretty upset about the whole sleeping together thing. We did speculate that maybe she was faking it. She just got a hickey. Maybe she was faking the hickey, working with Archie. And it turns out, in fact, it's not exactly that, but she lied about going all the way in order to get her parents off her back. It spins wildly out of control because we're in the 50s and because the parents find out they slept together. Clifford Blossom, returning guest star, and Mary Andrews decide that the kids need to get married. They go through a marriage compatibility test thanks to Dr. Werther's.
Three questions.
So many questions.
Are we going to do this?
Three questions.
Oh, the test you're talking about, Pete?
Yeah, all it is 3 questions.
Well, I thought,
that's
I don't know if
plenty.
you're going to do this, Justin, if we want to jump to this right now, but I thought the 3 of us should probably take the compatibility test.
Yeah, no, we definitely, it's long overdue.
Real quick, do we come from different backgrounds?
Yep.
Honestly, not really. Yeah. Pete, the only difference between you and I is you say I like garbage plates, and I didn't know what that meant.
Right. You both grew up in upstate New York.
What are you talking about?
You and I went to college in the same town.
Yeah. You grew up in a well, drinking from a well like some ring monster, dude. Don't say we grew up the same.
I didn't climb out of the well. I grew up in the country, and we had a well. I didn't fetch water.
I've seen pictures of the house way out there. It looks like someone crawled out of a pipe and then like set up a camp.
Okay, well, I think we've established
pretty mixed answers.
Next one, are you close friends? Ooh, this is a tough one. Pete?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, I was expecting a different answer there. Great. And the last one, do you understand the concept of marriage?
No.
Oh,
Justin?
Into trouble. I mean, I guess I am married, so seems to understand it pretty well.
Well, I guess by the Werther's scale, we are allowed to get married. There you go, because the answers don't actually seem to matter at all.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, this test feels like it's designed for someone to be like, you passed or you failed. You can't ever see each other again. It's very much like well, that's what it gets to me to a larger point about this episode. There's so much sort of satire going on in this season and this episode particularly, where it's like they're unabashedly having these characters go through things that are sort of what we think and know. Some of what we know happened back in like the 50s, and they're not winking at it. And then the show is being shot in a way that I think is really specifically the Cheryl Archie stuff we're talking about was so like Norman Rockwell, Americana, like storybook. They're on the bridge in the early scene this episode.
Oh, the bridge was nice.
And it's shot in a way where it's meant to look like this storybook American romance. But underneath it all, we know it's all fake. It's all smoke and mirrors. There's no real. Archie's swept up in it, doesn't know how he feels, and is just going along with it because he doesn't want anyone to feel bad. Cheryl, meanwhile, is doing this a little bit out of spite, and she like has a lot of swirling feelings happening for her. I think she does care for Archie as a person,
right?
As we find out later when she's talking to Toni. But her attraction is for Toni.
Right.
So like I thought this episode was really smart, and the test that we just took and passed with flying colors is another example of that. It's something that is meant to be this like authority you put on like forcing these two kids to get married when it's absolute bullshit.
Yeah, I think this is jumping ahead to the Toni Fangs Midge stuff, but just on your thing about the whole satire, there was the whole frog test thing, which sounds insane.
But that's 100% accurate.
Yes,
it's real.
What was it? The Hodgson test, I think it's called. And they used it for
the old. I just need some pee in a frog.
Yeah,
Hogbin test.
Hogbin, there you go.
And it's a very much a real thing, and like it wasn't perfect. There were some false positives in the
from the reading in this episode, it seemed 100% accurate.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, from the reading, there was a great article about it in the Atlantic that I read because immediately after the episode, I was like, that can't be true. And then I read several things, and I was like, this is true. And in the Atlantic, they said that they did all these tests, and I think they got 3 false positives out of several hundred tests or something like that. But even
that's what I mean. It was pretty accurate. It's sort of, I didn't read this, but the numbers are sort of similar to what actual pregnancy tests that we buy at the pharmacy are. So it's
why are we wasting our time with pregnancy tests then?
Do you got a frog? You got a frog? You could just.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
why not?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to mention that just because I think this definitely felt like, and I don't say this derisively, an episode where somebody was like, we did a lot of research on the 1950s. Here you go. But it's fun to get these details, and they feel... It's crazy that in this show that we talk about... It's
fun and also scary.
Well, it's fun and also scary, but also like this marriage test and this frog test are things that if they did them on Riverdale, and let's say they were only Riverdale things, we'd be like, yep, that fits. If they did that in a regular episode of Riverdale that is not back in the 1950s, we'd be like, this is regular Riverdale craziness. Yep, totally tracks. And here they're doing it. It fits with the show, but it's actually real at the same time, which is kind of fascinating.
Well, and I think that may be, I don't know how deep sort of the satire goes, but they may be sort of doing that on purpose to be like, look, this feels like wild Riverdale stuff. But that's the way things were for real in the 50s, just showing that like the whole point of this show to undercut the town with pep. There's this bright, shiny Riverdale, and underneath things are a little messier, showing that that's how reality actually is as well.
Wow, man.
To get back to the Archie thing, though, and you talked about this a little bit, Justin, but I really loved how KJ Apa and Madeleine Petsch played this episode, particularly Madeleine Petsch. You know, you mentioned really liking the bridge scene. And what I thought was really interesting about this that made me upset at the end of the last episode, because they kind of played it for goofy comedy, but here they played it mostly straight, is... she's really trying. She is in an era where she's like, I'm supposed to be straight. That is what I am supposed to be feeling. Archie is this good guy who's giving up his entire life for me. I got to try to make this work. And she gives him this look that seems like in any other circumstance would be this romantic moment. But we know there's this undercurrent of, tension there in terms of the way she's playing it, of like, I have to make this work. I have to make this. This is what I'm supposed to do for this great guy who's giving up this stuff. I got to kiss him. That's what he wants. That's what he wants right now. I got to give this to him. And this is what's right for me. But ultimately she goes on this journey by the end where she realizes, no, this isn't right for me. And this isn't right for Archie. And ultimately tells him what she thinks is right for Archie, that we could probably talk about as well. But I thought they played this across the board really well. It was, to me, the entire opposite of what I felt from the last episode.
I did feel like it was very Archie. You know what I mean? Like only Archie could like accidentally stumble into a marriage and be like, oh, geez, I got to get married because this is the right thing to do. So it was like because it was Archie, it felt a little lighter, you know what I mean? Which was nice, where you weren't kind of like really worried for these characters. But yeah, I thought it was a very interesting and cool kind of putting them together. I think they're really having some fun with this show, being like, oh, well, we know what you ships that are and what you want. We're gonna play a little shell game for a little bit. We're gonna keep you guessing. We're gonna mix things up a little bit. So they're having fun. So it's hard. I'm trying not to get too invested too early while we're in the 50s here.
Nice.
Bad news for you. We're going to be in the 50s for most of the season.
That's okay. I'm still, I can't get my hopes up, man. I can't get my hopes up.
It's funny you say that, Pete. I feel like a lot of people are a little bit, any criticism of the season are like, well, it's the 50s. What does this matter? And I don't know. I think the show is sharper than it's ever been, because we're getting to do the murder stuff that we all like and the wildness of that. They're actually doing some like sharp takes on what it meant to be a teenager in the 50s, what it means to be a teenager now. And it's still the same characters and potential relationships that we've always been obsessed with. The show's operating on so many levels.
I disagree there, because you said something that's not universally true. Okay, we're not all pushing for the murder in Riverdale. Some of us want the fridge chaining. You know what I mean? Some of us think chaining someone to the fridge is the real Riverdale.
This is Jughead? No.
Yep,
Jughead was chained to the handcuffed to the fridge? I don't think he was chained to a fridge.
No, he was chained to a fridge. He was chained to the fridge, yeah, because he was going to play that game, and he was like
gargoyles.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't been following the hashtag FridgeHead on Twitter, but let me know how it's popping these days and how you and the rest of the FridgeHead gang is doing. But I guess what I'm saying is like this. That people can have their individual criticisms, but I think the show is sort of at its peak form right now. And I look forward to seeing it all move forward in every which way. Back on Archie and Cheryl, though, like Archie is this kid who just is like, I'm in love now, and I will marry this person, and I'm going to go on the bus. If that's what, no, I'm not. Okay, who do I love now? Like, he is just this simple point Archie at anyone that Cheryl literally does later in the episode. It's like, can I point you toward Betty? She will love you. She needs someone in her life desperately, and you're that person. So I thought that was interesting. And Cheryl, meanwhile, is like complete opposite. Has this all these intense feelings just boiling underneath her that she's just trying to keep a lid on until, again, the end of the episode when she is maybe the door is open for her and Toni, I think.
And the note about Toni there, like just talking about her, Toni
rising.
It is Shoni rising 100%. But I also liked how they played this. Obviously, I want to see Shoni together. Obviously, I want to see them kiss and, get married and snow kiss and whatever, all the good things that you have.
Snow kiss.
But the idea of...
Did you say snow kiss?
Yeah, snow kiss, ring kiss,
The ultimate kiss is with precipitation.
Mm-hmm. You just say I want all the kisses.
Yeah, I want all the kisses.
A hail kiss? I love a hail kiss. It's sort of very intense.
Tornado kiss, hurricane kiss.
That's the ultimate. That's what you dream of.
Yeah. Here's a kiss that's going to blow you away. I'm sorry.
I like a morning dew kiss.
Saying that. Anyway, but I like how they're playing this in terms of Toni. Last episode, there was this thing where she was like, I'm playing the long game. And that's sort of a sexy way of saying it. But here... she's giving Cheryl time. It's this coming out story of Toni knows who she is. She's confident in who she is. She knows that she's bisexual and she's happy being bisexual, but she's not going to force Cheryl out of the closet. She's not going to be like, you love me, I love you, let's do this thing. She's going to let Cheryl take her time and let Cheryl come to this realization in a time when you could say it even less than you can now. And we are dealing with a lot of stuff, particularly in the news, where it's becoming harder and harder for people to say it right now. So the way they're playing out this as small town America coming out story, even though we saw it, we saw it already in season 2 and peppered a little bit after that as Cheryl grappled with various things, we're still getting it in a fresh and new way that feels very relevant.
Well, and I think what it was in the earlier seasons, it felt like it was sort of like there was so much happening and it was just like a little piece of the story. This feels very meticulous and thoughtfully done. The story is sort of about this rather than it being a story that ends up touching on Cheryl coming out and finding out who she is.
Well, and it's also less arch, right? As much as I think the Sisters of the Quiet Mercy rescue episode where they go in and Toni and Cheryl kiss for the first time in front of the projector is easily one of the most romantic moments in Riverdale history, this is a very different way to take it. Just have Cheryl say, I don't know where to go from here. And Toni says, read this book, see if it sparks any feelings, and then let's have a conversation about it. And that feels like... obviously, I am not a woman who was gay in the 1950s, but that feels pretty true, like the frog thing, like the marriage test thing of, we can't talk about this, but I could hand you this book, and you can let me know what you think about this book, and we could have sort of a coded conversation about it and then talk about it more in private. So I really like how this is rolling out. It's great.
Agreed.
Let's move it over to Toni because she does have this other plot line that we mentioned before where, well, she's actually doing a lot of stuff in this episode.
Well, it's funny. In this episode, I noticed she has a lot of like sort of jazz undertone for her music when she's on screen. And I feel like it's it puts her in such a power position. She has this like almost like, to use the very modern term, like main character energy, where she is the one that everyone is orbiting around. And she's the one people have to go to be like, help, fix my life. I've messed this up. Like, what can I do? And she literally is doing that. Like, it's like she's taking appointments. She's a life coach. She's setting people up. You got 4 months to become famous. Let's go.
I think I joked about this on a previous episode, but I felt it even more strongly in this episode. I don't think they're going to go this route, but the way that Vanessa Morgan is playing Toni and how confident she is and clear on what she wants, I think that's her character. Toni is kind of like that anyway. But if they revealed that Toni has all of her memories for the present timeline, I would 100% not be surprised at all.
Well, let's be real here. A mystery we haven't talked about is there is another character who knows about what's going on, right? Out there in this time because of, well, we had the Jughead crown thing from the first episode. Like, there's another person who seems to at least be aware that something is strange. Like, so There very well could be another of our characters here who does have their memories, and we don't know. So maybe that's the
interesting.
Toni.
I didn't read it that way. I thought that was just something left behind from Tabitha after she wiped Jughead's memories. But yeah, it could be somebody. It could be Toni took it and left him a clue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because the Tabitha thing doesn't like. Why would she do that? Like as a memento? Well, to me, it wasn't played. That was played like as a mystery thing and not like a sentimental thing left behind. Yeah. So I don't know. I think there's another shoe to drop there. Otherwise, why do all of that work in the first episode? The time capsule, all that. Like it feels like there's something more to be revealed there to me.
Interesting. And the last thing that I'll throw out about this, and then we can move on to something else, but they've already played the Toni and Cheryl immortal soulmates in any timeline thing. So if any character or characters was going to have that, break through that thing, I feel like it would be Toni and Cheryl. So I don't know.
That's the Shody in you talking.
Oh, did I take it too far? Did I take
you
it one step too far?
You literally were like, they've already been shown to be immortal partners. So if there's anyone who's an immortal partner, it's these two immortal partners. It's like, oh, great point, master debater. You really nailed it. On the Toni story though, the Midge Fang stuff. Like bit where she's like, first off, she's like, can you dig it, Big Daddy? And he's like, haha, good one. Cool it with the jokes, lady. I'm just stressed out. And she's like, I got the solution. You have to become bigger than Elvis. And you have 4 months before Midge starts showing. I was like, yeah, that's the big plan. That's a huge swing right there.
I mean, here's the thing. He's going to do it, right? Like Fangs is 100% going to become a famous rock star and marry Midge.
He's already beat out Kevin and the Crooners, so
huge.
That they're basically, top 10. I'm sure.
The wild thing about this story, I don't know if they did this on purpose or there were scenes left on the cutting room floor, but everything that happened, for the most part, happened off screen. Where Fangs and Midge, first of all, like last we saw them, they were groping on each other.
You need to see them have sex. You needed to see her get impregnated.
What are you talking about?
Yes, I need to see the Fangs and Midge.
You want to see the dad like yelling at him?
In the background with one of those old timey cameras, cranking it the entire time. The camera, to be clear.
I like the Fangs kind of walking in afterwards, being like, "Well, that went awful."
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying is she's like, you got to go ask for their hand. And then we didn't see that happen.
No.
And then, I don't know. It just felt like there were a couple of scenes that were like off screen that were happening in the middle of the storyline.
Riverdale knows what you need. They're not going to show you something like and hire a bunch of other actors to play all those characters. You don't need that. You need Fangs coming and being like, oh, that was bad. And then we're on.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this? Are you shipping Fidge? Pete, you love fridges, so do you like Fidge as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Change of the Fidge. Hashtag change of the Fidge.
The relation to Fridge. But because I like them together.
Right.
They see, well, it's interesting, Fangs, the previous iteration of Fangs, like, are we going to explore that side of his sort of sexual
Fangs
reality?
And Toni, is that what you're saying?
Him being bisexual, you mean?
Yeah. Well, and Fangs and Toni, like there's a ton of stuff. Like Fangs
that's
what's weird. In the comic book, this season sort of is using a lot of the comic book tropes. In the comic books, Moose and Midge are the two that are together. Mm-hmm. And so they've sort of, I feel like, split Moose a little bit, the big, dumb oaf type in the comic books.
Archie?
Well, that's what I was going to say is like Fangs is dating Midge and is sort of being like trying to figure that out and sort of being a bit dopey about it. And then Archie is the other side of Moose who's just like, hey, I love this, like very simple, like one thought in, one thought out type of person.
It's the way to do it.
It does feel a little bit like, hey, we can't put Fangs with Toni because we got to head towards Shody. So what do we have Fangs do? Oh, bring Midge back with a new actress. There we go. We're good. And it's fine. I mean, it's working for me. I just didn't want to mention about the whole bisexual thing. Maybe they'll address it. He's still bisexual, even if he's dating a woman. So that hasn't changed. I don't think they're going to wipe that out just because they go back in time.
But by not sort of referencing it or talking about it, I feel like it is a little bit sort of saying it's not relevant to this character.
Well, so here's something that I wonder. I interviewed KJ Apa, and
I knew you were going to shoehorn this shit in.
No, because I do think it's relevant. He gave me this.
We weren't even fucking talking about Archie.
Sorry that my interview with KJ Apa seems relevant to our Riverdale podcast.
It's definitely, that's what I'm saying. It's relevant.
At least wait until we're talking about Archie.
But no, I think this is relevant to the discussion we're having right now. Is he mentioned this thing that I've read through several times and I can't quite parse, where he was talking about they're going to explore Archie's sexuality, something they haven't done before. I'm paraphrasing what he said, and that he thought it was very exciting because they haven't really explored the straight character's sexuality in the same way. And in my head, I was like, does that mean he's talking about by Archie? Does that mean he's talking about, because we've certainly seen Archie have sex a lot.
Yeah. I was going to say, we don't need.
So I do think there's two potential things that could happen here that I've been thinking about since I saw this episode. One,
sex
Uncle
with bears. He's talking about bears.
Well, he's had two experiences with bears, right? The first experience is when the bear killed him, and the second experience is when the bear killed his boner, which we got to see last episode. Right, Pete?
Great.
Oh my
Pete?
God.
Come on.
Move back on, please.
Anyway, my point being, at the end, Uncle Frank shows up and is like, I got to knock some heads here. Come on. You've been having all this sex. So there might be like a frank discussion about male sexuality.
A frank discussion.
Wow.
Frank's discussion. I like you. That was an accident, but that was discussion. Nothing franker than Uncle Frank.
Next episode, and maybe that's what he's talking about. But the other possibility is, as the members of the friend group get more open about homosexuality, obviously Kevin and Clay, we haven't talked about them yet, but are dancing this episode, and Kevin kind of comes out to Betty, or is essentially forced out to Betty.
I think Betty sort of tells him what's going on.
Exactly. And Cheryl is grappling with things with Toni, like we talked about. There might be bigger conversations with that, where I could see a character like Archie or Fangs. Archie be like, wait, so am I also gay? What is going on here? How does this work? And they talk about it. Maybe they all go to a safe space gay club together. Maybe that's a place where, and the reason I brought this up, sorry, Pete, was you could have a scene like that where they all go together and Fangs is like, oh, that guy's cute. And Midge is like, come on, Fangs, or whatever. So you get a nod there. It's still part of it, but he is with Midge at the current time.
Yes, though I also think exploring Archie's sexuality could also be about how he seems to have sex a lot all the time without connecting feelings to it. Like, there's a lot. Sexuality doesn't just mean like who you're attracted to always. It can be just how you experience sex, the way you explore it in yourself. Like, I think there's a lot of ways to talk about Archie's sexuality without necessarily meaning that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to parse what he meant. I mean, any which way it goes, I'm excited to get in Archie's head more, because this season I feel like we've been watching
I don't know. I'm worried about getting in his head. It could be scary in there, man.
Yeah, but it's good though. It'll be one thought in, one thought out. Like you said, Pete, you love it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Let's talk about Clevin. We need to talk about Clevin.
Wait, I wanted to talk about, because in your interview with Archie, which I think is very relevant right now.
Just to be clear, Pete, he didn't interview the Archie, the person. There's an actor who plays Archie.
Okay, right.
I have been trying to talk to the characters in the comic books for a while, but they don't talk back.
They don't respond.
It's funny how they don't do that. Anyways, when you were talking, he mentioned the fact that he thinks it's going to be Barchie Endgame.
Barchie's Endgame.
You're jumping right to that.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, that's
Pete.
why I figured you did such a smooth segue into that. I figured I could do it too. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Really beautifully done.
Yes. Well, he did mention, in his opinion, first of all, and I'll couch this in, he doesn't know how the show is going to end. I asked him, he doesn't even know that they're going to jump from the 1950s at some point. They're still filming the season. They've got, I guess, I don't know how dates work, but at least a month or two left of filming at this point, which is another couple of episodes. Roberto said that they're going to be jumping forward for the 1950s. They're not going to be there the whole season. He did not know that. He doesn't know how the show is end. He did, when I interviewed him, he was like, yeah, I was thinking last night, maybe they're going to kill me. I don't know what's going to happen. So he really has no idea. But he was saying, in his opinion, between Barchie and Varchie, he said that he felt like Betty and Archie are such good friends their whole lives, it's hard to not see them together. And then when I asked him about Veronica and Archie as well, particularly because in the third episode, there were two things that happened. One, there was that whole bee flower moment where Jughead I'm forgetting what exactly he says in narration, but he's like, Archie was entrapped by her feminine wiles or whatever he said.
Yeah.
And then Archie seemed pretty into the kiss that Veronica was giving him. So I was like, okay, maybe we'll get more of this at some point. Again, in his opinion, he was like, I don't think so. That in terms of Veronica and Archie, maybe as friends, but not necessarily romantically. Again,
okay,
he doesn't know the ending. He doesn't know the last couple of episodes.
Follow-up question.
Yes. Oh, boy, here we go.
The point of asking somebody who obviously doesn't know what their opinion is. Like, what?
No, he knows what his opinion is. He doesn't know what the facts are.
That fucking spear
are you
in there
attacking
and be like,
me for my interview with KJ Apa live on this podcast?
Is the fact that you were like, yeah, so this guy who works in the show but doesn't really have a say, he fucking wants Barchi. So fuck all y'all, yeah.
I
like,
never said
why? Why get it so worked
I very
up
specifically
like that?
did not say that.
Well, Pete, I think, you are obviously...
Him as an actor who doesn't know if he's going to die in any episode or not. Like,
can I just mention one last thing, okay? At the end of the interview, I usually don't glue the end of the interview when we're like, okay, bye, thanks so much, I'm really enjoying the show or whatever. The sign-off that we said, he was like, okay, thanks so much for the questions, Alex, Bughead Bones. And I was like, Bughead Bones. And then we hung up the phone. Is that cool, Pete?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel better?
Bughead Bones.
I don't know what that means.
Bughead's dead.
I was just excited you said
that
Bughead.
Didn't happen. I just want to clarify for the podcast that didn't happen.
Of course it didn't
I'm just
happen.
being mean to Pete.
Yeah,
That's
I think
all.
you like. I think KJ Apa hung up, and then you were like, "Hey, do you think Barchi's endgame?" And then just make dial tone noise.
With KJ Apa?
Just make a dial tone noise if it's yes, and it was like.
Dial tone.
I actually
interviews on a
now that I
landline?
think about it, I think I interviewed AJ Kappa.
See,
who is my dentist?
Reverse. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when he said
Archie.
Bughead Bones, he was talking about like I eat a lot of bugs, and they're in my head, and my teeth are.
Sounds like a great
bones.
dentist.
Yeah.
You got teeth bugs.
He's not good.
Pete, I don't know
cheap,
why you're so focused on worrying about Barchi when you have a real relationship for your guy to talk about. We have Veronica.
That's my favorite Jewish holiday.
Verhenica.
Out to you.
Here's the crazy thing about Veronica. You expect it to last for one episode, and then magically it lasts for 8
keeps
episodes.
going.
Wow.
It keeps
episodes. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
that's really
Can we talk about
incredible.
Clevin, though? We were talking about Clevin, and then we got off on a tangent. Clavin. I was very surprised about this also, talking about things happening off screen. We never got to see this conversation that Clay and Kevin had. And instead, all we get it is through the reaction of Betty after they break up with Toni going to the coffee shop and seeing the two of them dancing. What did you feel about this choice?
Well, first off, Tony's line, boys are the worst or guys are the worst or whatever was pretty funny. But it was
boys ruin everything.
Boys ruin everything. Thank you. And so but it was sweet to see Kevin happy for a couple of seconds there before he was in extreme denial about it. We were just kidding. It was just a joke.
Well, yeah, and that opened the door to them having a real conversation about it. But to your question, Alex,
conversation.
I thought it was. I liked it. It put us in Betty's shoes for it, where it was a surprise to us as fans, as viewers. And I thought since we sort of already knew that they were into each other, we knew that Clay was telling him, was out to him. I actually thought it was a great way to actually surprise us with it when they sort of showed us all the cards already. So I thought it was a good job.
I think it was executed really well. I thought the shot of Betty realizing on the stairs as Toni is like, oh, well, let's go literally anywhere else. Let's get out of here. That slow push in on her, on Lily Reinhart, as she realizes what's happening, and then she runs out of there. Even her reaction to Alice afterwards, she's like, it's okay, he likes boys. It felt like a very teenager thing to me to just kind of blurt that out to your mom and not really realize about the consequences of telling her that, although obviously it goes in a very different direction. I do think my one little qualm with it is the same thing that we've gotten over this entire show. You like to talk about getting in people's heads, Justin. Like you said, it makes it a Betty storyline instead of a Kevin storyline. And there are
That's fair.
things that happen with Kevin here, and we do get these discussions where, like Pete was saying, he essentially is told what's going on with him by Betty, but it takes it out of his hands. Once again, it puts Kevin at second tier under another character, which was a little bit of a bummer for me.
Well, but I think we're going to get that story. This is only the touch of it. And to me, like in the earlier episodes of this season, we've gotten Kevin's point of view on Clay, and it felt like their relationship was progressing. We flipped in this episode to Betty. I bet we flip back and get to actually see their romance happen, because it seems like they're right at the very beginning of it, and we haven't actually missed much of their story. So I feel like we'll get to it, even though the perspective was shifted here.
Yeah, I hope so, because I think the way kind of Betty talked to Kevin, that back and forth that they had was really nice. It was two people who care very much about each other, having a discussion and trying to be supportive. So I thought it was like that part was cool, but I agree. Yeah, like I would definitely want Kevin to have his moment, but I feel like we've been saying that for how many seasons?
Right, exactly. Also, I wanted to mention, not to call you out, Pete, but I thought this was interesting. You got a little bit of a vibe from Betty and Toni, right?
Well, a little bit of where Toni was like, yeah, boys are the worst. We should go get coffee and talk about it. You know what I mean? Where I was just like, Toni, all right. Okay, take it easy, Toni.
Now, do you ship Boney or Shoni?
I'm Shoni, but I do think Toni is, very, very cool with everybody and is super helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, Betty feels like she just is a hormonal explosion. She has sex on her mind, and it's sort of coming out any which way it can at this point.
I hesitate to bring this up because, again, I will mention we are three guys on a podcast, but there's been a lot of discussion about Betty this season. A lot of people upset about saying they don't like horny Betty. They feel like that's done a disservice to the character. How do you guys feel about it so far?
It's fun. I like it as like we always get like the guy, the teenage boy who's like, I'm horny, I need to do this. The flip of that and have it be Betty, I think is a great choice, especially, and it makes sense with the story because she's been with Kevin for a while and they haven't done that because of he's not attracted to her. And so she, of course, has like bottled up sexual feelings. I think they've underlined it really well. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, I hear. I definitely agree with what you're saying, Justin. I do want there to be more to Betty than just horny Betty. But yes, I feel like it's a good switch. It's also nice. I feel like teenagers in general, not in the 50s at any time, have to deal with a lot of different changes and stuff. So it's fun not fun, but it's relatable to see people struggle with stuff and have a hard time.
Well, and I also think the Betty we know hasn't gone away. Like we talked about, these still are the characters we know. They're giving little nods to it here and there, and I feel like it's getting stronger as the episodes go on. Like, forgetting the first episode for a second, which I think was Betty.
Done.
She was editor-in-chief of the Blue and Gold. She was there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Like we talked about, once you had that Jughead reset at the end of the first episode, it almost feels like episode 2 is where they really started, where we were off to the races with what they were doing. And we got that moment the last episode where they narrowly missed each other. She was investigating something in a certain way, or at least looking at it. And this episode, she figures out the thing about the pin based on a clue from Kevin. So it's not like hardcore murder mystery the same way that Jughead is dealing with, but we are still getting little notes of that investigator Betty. And I think as the season goes on, that's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger and bigger, or at least I hope it will.
It's fun to hear you talk about a Riverdale like it's a fine wine. You're like, I'm getting notes of this. This is really nice.
Well, but it is complex as a very high-end Chateauneuf de Pape.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would argue that there's occasionally a lot of tannin right at the bottom there, and that's pretty gross. But
exactly.
Move on. You drink it, you want to get drunk.
Often, Pete, you walk out with the only tannin.
I'm like, guys, stop tanning so much.
Not what we're talking about.
Real wine guy down here.
Let's talk about
just one last thing on that. Like, I feel like there are a ton of characters, a ton of storylines to follow in Riverdale. And so we can't tell all the stories at once. And the story they're telling about Betty right now is about her feeling like she has to experience some sort of sex. And so, like, that's just where she is right now. Like you said, none of what came before is erased, and there's going to be more down the road. It's just we're in that part of the story right now. So I think trust Riverdale. at the end.
There we go. Let's talk about Veronica and their team up this episode, talking about investigators.
Oh, shucks.
They are the Nick and Nora Charles of Riverdale. It's definitely a different sort of investigation. But over the course of the episode, they managed to free Ethel from jail, thanks to figuring out that she was with Julian at the night in question. He was going all octopus hands.
Awful.
Jughead straight up pugilist style. He does like sort of the
old-timey It's the 50s. This is how the old rock.
Punches out Julian, forces him to confess the truth. Ultimately, Ethel is freed. Meanwhile, along the way, Jughead's train car has been trashed. Veronica gets him to stay at the Pembroke. She remakes it into like something out of Murder at the Orient Express is what I think he says. Murder on the Orient Express. And then by the end of the episode, they are smooch-a-loochin'. Veronica rising. How are we feeling about this?
Well, I mean, I was kind of hoping that Jughead would freak out a little bit. Like, you know, sometimes when you see those home makeover shows and somebody makes a big choice, the person like loses it and it's like, what the fuck did you do? You know, so I was hoping for a little bit of that.
What home makeover shows are you watching?
Oh, man, I watch the good ones.
Like,
you know
outright
I mean? The ones on YouTube. Nice. Yeah. Where it's like hidden cameras and stuff. No, I just think that like
dark web home makeover shows.
Yeah, it was with me. I just feel like this is adorable, and I'm trying to fight against how much I'm enjoying this team up. I mean, part of me is like, hey, just enjoy. It's the 50s. It's the 50s. Just enjoy this. But part of me is like, this isn't my ship. This isn't the ship that I want.
Pouty Pete doesn't get his ship. Well, I think you embrace that feeling because, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but part of what you loved about Bughead was they're solving cases and kissing at the close. And that's what we're getting here. We're getting that with them. And it's
basically the same thing. Like you're saying, Justin, women are interchangeable. Is that the point?
That's not.
Just to check.
That's not what I'm saying.
Sounded like that's what you were.
Definitely not saying that, because I think
also
Jughead's he's a completely different guy in this situation. Yes. But I do think in a reset, I think the attraction there is similar to what the Bughead attraction especially started with, where it was we're doing this thing together, and then sparks started to fly. I mean, all detectives end up, having a little romance in there.
Mm-hmm. What? Cagney and Lacey,
Jake and the Fat Man. These are all shows that were on air like in the 80s.
Wow. That was top of mind as you guys all pulled those two out of here.
All the Law and Order cast members, they're always screwed around.
Yeah. Wow. Great. I like this. I think this is a cute relationship. I don't think we're going to end up necessarily with Veronica Endgame by the end of the series, but like we've been talking about, this reset to the 1950s, even though it's consistent with the characters emotionally, is allowing them to explore things in different ways. Some of the things feel bad, like Sharshi, and some of the things are interesting and kind of fun and different, like Veronica. And like you said, Pete, I'm sure plenty of people are very upset about it because it's not their ship, but it's something that like they haven't tried for 6 seasons. Will it work? Probably not, but could it work? Maybe. At least they're trying it out and having fun while they do it. And these versions of the characters, like, they've been pretty clear since they reintroduced Veronica at the beginning of the season that most of what she's doing is because she's lonely, and Jughead is also on his own and lonely. And to put these two characters together that can get rid of their loneliness together and really bond over the things that they like, monster movies, detective stories, etc., it's fun to watch. I'm enjoying it.
Definitely. And even if it's not like, it doesn't end up being like this big romance, I think their connection is strong and real no matter what it ends up being. Like, if it's hard to, like, with Tabitha being gone, but still like that great moment they had at the end of the first episode, it's hard to be like, and now Jughead's happy with this other person. When, we sort of, I think it feels like the show is like Tabitha's where it's at. But like, there are all sorts of different relationships, and maybe theirs is like they're going to kiss a little, but maybe it'll end up being friends. Sort of like the way that Bughead ended up when they ended their relationship.
You probably didn't need to bring that quite up.
Yeah,
at the end,
come on, dude. What the fuck?
That's just what happened. I'm not saying anything out of turn.
But I do think this is a fun thing that I'm excited to see them explore more. What other moments from the episode should we call out here?
Well, there's we didn't talk a ton about the Blossoms, and that's, I think, is worth. First off, you have Julian, like you said. The way that he sort of gets with Ethel felt like very coincidental that he picks her up the night that the parents are killed. And it made me think that last episode we talked about how the Coopers have couple serial killer energy. The emergence of Clifford in this episode and Julian being in that situation, I was like, oh, right, Clifford's also a maniac parent here in town who is capable of murder for some reason. And there, like we know, there's a connection between the Blossoms and the Coopers related to the maple syrup business in Riverdale. So maybe there's a reason that they could be sort of working together. And I don't know how Ethel's parents factor into that, but who knows what's happening.
Maybe this season's going to end up in some sort of like Wicker Man type thing where all of the parents, all of the villains from all of the season come back. They're all serial killers. They're like, yep, we got to sacrifice a bunch of people to keep the crops going, the maple crops going. So there you go. Could happen.
Yeah.
It's Riverdale, man.
I mean, we already know these parents love calling each other to talk about their kids' sex lives. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity for them to connect.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about the when Archie was talking to Cheryl about his dad. That got me in the feels. And when he had that line about like just being cowboys together, there was like just the way he played that as an actor was really nice. And the kind of high regard that he holds for his father was just was a nice kind of little moment.
I really like the dinner scene where Clifford says, what do you think about the Russian problem? And Cheryl's just getting eyes at Archie.
Yeah, and Archie's like, yeah, it's a problem, all right. Oh, we'll be talking about it, right?
I love that he finished his answer and was like, nailed it. And everyone else is like, what did that kid just say?
Veronica's line after she clears Jughead's name saying, I'm a very busy teenager, was very funny. And also Sheriff Keller's reaction to that. What were you going to say, Justin?
Yeah, agree on both those. I love Archie's reaction. Like, I have to get married and take a test. Very Archie reaction. More worried about the test than the upcoming marriage. The other thing I wanted to say was there's that moment when Jughead goes back to his train car and he's like, where's hot dog? Yeah. And I don't know if we've talked about this in a while, but like there's a comic book, Afterlife with Archie, written by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa, right? That sort of like was, I don't know what stage Riverdale was in, but like probably it hadn't happened yet, or maybe he was pitching it at the same time he was doing this comic. Do you have a take on that?
No, all I was going to say is that like Afterlife with Archie is basically Afterlife with Archie and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina are the two things that kicked him into being creative officer of Archie, which is how he got to pitch Riverdale. He may have had it bubbling in the background, but it's definitely after that in the timeline.
And anyway, Afterlife with Archie is like the Archie character's in a zombie apocalypse, basically. And there was a moment when Jughead is like, where's Hot Dog? Because in the comic, Hot Dog is sort of the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. I was like, this is it. They're going to do it. For just a second, it flashed there. And it made me think they could do an episode if they're going to do it. It's a great hearkening back to Roberto's beginning with these characters in comic book form. A one-off episode, Afterlife with Archie. Let's go. Yeah,
I would love to see that. That would be very fun. I know I mentioned it before, but there was a line I wrote down from Cheryl where she is talking to, I think it was Betty and Archie. Betty's digging into Archie for getting married, and Cheryl was like, you coming, Archie? And then she just says, wunderbar, very quickly, which was very funny. Yeah. But it wasn't like a classic Cheryl wunderbar. It was her, like the way she's playing it, she, of all the cast, is the one who's making herself the most look like a teenager, you know? Archie, KJ Apa doing a great job of playing it, but he's not a teenager. He's mid to late 20s at this point. You can tell it's fine. But he's like, oh, gee whiz, I'm a little kid. Wow-wee. Versus the way Madeline Plesh is playing it, like she has her shoulders kind of hunched in and she's making herself physically smaller. I think it helps that she's with Archie in this episode and he's taller than her. So she's like looking up like a little kid. So I don't know. It's just the way that she's delivering the lines and doing it. I think she's doing it.
What do you think the Wunderbar was about then? If you're
well, it's not wunderbar. It's sort of like it's a classic Cheryl line where she'd be like wunderbar and then wander away, except it's not actually wonderful. That's all.
Well, let me throw this out, and I'd have to rewatch it. It's not much of a theory. It's just like
theory. This is the biggest theory of the episode. Take it away.
She sees Betty and Archie together, and maybe she's like, "Oh, that was her way of being like, I see this." And because later on in the episode, she literally like, "That girl isn't me," and it's like, "Betty's that girl for you." So like maybe that was her sort of having that idea to then send Archie at the end of the episode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, we are clearly heading towards Barchi here, right? Like, they're going to keep throwing.
Dude, shut up a second. I'm trying to. While you guys were talking about the Blossoms, the part where Mrs. Blossom was like, "Oh man, what do you think about these kids getting together?" I mean, they're both redheads. I was just like, "Shut up and get in the wall. Get in a wall, Mrs. Blossom. I'm sick of you. Just get in a wall."
I mean, there's a lot of redheads on this show right now. Let's be honest.
Yeah. It's true. Compared to the percentage of them and the shrinking percentage in the U.S. general population, it's shocking. But a couple other things I would say. Well, I mean, we should talk about Alice sends Ethel to the Sisterhood of the Quiet Mercy, as we talked about. That's a problem. Are we going to get a Jughead rescue mission?
I think so, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe not next
Jughead
episode,
and Veronica?
Yeah, I think they'd probably team up to get her out or at least visit her. But yeah, I hope so. Shannon Purser has been great this season. So good. Yeah. So I hope they don't keep her off screen too long.
Agreed. And she has to play a lot of different tones. She has to play like teen who's finding success drawing, like shocked trauma moment teen. And then like in the house, like helping out Betty, and these like she has to do so many different things, and she's doing a great job. And let's shout out our favorite new character, Frank's vicious mustache that he has at the end of this episode.
Let's do it.
Just
come on,
absolutely
dude, Uncle
deadly.
Frank making that huge cock block entrance there.
Yeah,
he's like,
that was a very fun entrance because the way that they shot that, it was like, who is it? Who's coming back? Which character? Oh, it's Uncle Frank. Okay.
Yeah. Who we might expect.
Yeah. All right, there we go. But yes, he does have that sweet stash, and he was definitely doing like a 50s, I'm a rough and tumble dock worker guy growl, which is very fun as well. Before we wrap up here, who is the MVP of the episode? Pete, who is your MVP?
Oh, man. This was MVP. This was a really great episode for a lot of characters, a lot of great stuff. Who do I want to? Because I'm toying. I'm back and forth. I can't really decide between Betty and Toni, so I'm gonna give it to Betty. I'm gonna give it to Betty because that speech, that moment she has with Kev, where she's not upset about their relationship ending. She's a friend for to kind of talk things out with. So I was impressed with that move. So I'm gonna give it up for Betty being the MVP.
Justin, you got an MVP?
I got to give it up for Jughead in this episode. He is definitely sort of hitting he's sort of the Archie of this episode in some ways, where he gets in a fight. He stays at Veronica's house. He's got a budding romance. He's solving a mystery.
Cooks too much breakfast. Way too much. Like a shocking, but I guess a Jughead amount of breakfast.
Yeah,
he's a man for all seasons, and I salute him on this day.
Yeah, I'm going to give it up to Cheryl. That's probably not too much of a surprise.
Not a lot of surprise. You know what? We used to talk a lot about how Pete would give it up for Betty every episode. You've officially become that for Cheryl.
Cheryl all day, every day.
It looks like it.
She did a great job this episode. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. I am excited to see where Shoni goes next. And if you would like to support our podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast.
Every Tuesday?
YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, we do. Come out. We would love to talk to you about Riverdale, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Riverdale Dark on Twitter, Riverdale After on Instagram, Riverdale After Dark on Facebook, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast, and many more. Until next time, we'll see you after dark.
I keep taking these frog pregnancy tests, and now I have thousands of tadpoles. What do I do?
Oh, wow.